Planning Commission meeting for July 1st, 2024 is called to order. Could we have the roll call, please?
Commissioner Adler?
Here.
Commissioner Gold? Absent. Commissioner Commissioner Peterson?
Here.
Vice Chair Jameson?
Here.
Chair Williams?
Here. Stand for the pledge. Aaron, would you lead us today?
Sure. Place your right hand over your heart and repeat with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Does anybody want to change the order of the agenda? Or are you happy with the way it is?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Well, no, we have to go to, this is just that if you want to pull something or change the agenda. Okay, then we'll move to public comment. I have one speaker slip, Dennis Beebe, to speak on.
I'll back up, and Chair Williams, you do need to make a motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you. Good
Okay.
evening, Commissioners.
Dennis,
I didn't hear you.
I was just corrected.
Well, I didn't know whether it was public comment or
It
consent
is,
agenda
but I made a
comment.
mistake. So,
Motion to approve the order as listed.
Second.
moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes 4-0. Okay, Dennis, now.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for your service to the community.
What?
My name is Dennis Beebe, resident of Solvang, also a GPAC member. And some of my comments may slush into the agenda item. I looked very briefly at an onslaught of pages on the internet, but I want to comment on the minutes before you go to approve them. The only land use diagram I saw in the package, and I think it was part of the minutes, I didn't think had the right land use designation for infamous Site C. There was one color. I'm color defective. It looked like olive drab to me, which is high density, the entire site, both parcels. So as far as I know, the general plan, the council, and consistent with the housing element, agreed that the lower half, or about 2.5 acres, should be high density, and the remaining should remain low density. But the colors in the land use diagram in the package, apparently the minutes, didn't reflect that. The second item was, and maybe I'm slushing into the agenda item, the
If you're going
inconsistent.
to speak on the agenda item, then we ask that you.
Well, I'm
in
not
that public
sure,
hearing.
I'm not sure if I'm
Well,
commenting on
yeah.
minutes or not.
Now you can talk on things that are not on the agenda
Yes,
or
yes, sir,
any
I
of the
understand.
consent items,
I
which
thought
are
I could comment on the-
minutes
the minute.
and the current projects list.
Yes, I'm commenting on the minutes.
On what?
The minutes.
Oh, the minutes.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Before you approve them, I thought I'd point out what
Right,
I saw.
I thought you were changing your subject.
I try not to. I remember, in the previous meeting, I remember Commissioner Peterson recommending that the boundary of the Village Area Design District be slightly changed on 2 parcels along Oak. I didn't see it reflected in the minutes, and the only diagram I saw in the package didn't reflect that change either. So, I also saw inconsistency of terms of the names of these design districts. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak on this topic? Anybody online? No? Bringing it back. Any discussion on the part of the commission on the minutes or the project agenda?
Without, the comments that were made were in reference to the map And I don't have the map from last meeting in front of me to make a comment whether we kept the colors consistent on Project C or Lot C, whatever we're calling that, on Alamo Pantano Old Mission.
I'd like to clarify that. So the map that was included in your last package was the map from the April 2023 land use map, because that's the one that's been published. That's the map that was included. Now, the map that was included in your Planning Commission packet from last month also included an attachment to Exhibit C, which included the brand new land use map, which included the Site C per the direction of the City Council. So that is incorrect. That, you know, the one large map that was in the staff report alluded to the old designation, and the exhibit, and believe it was Exhibit C, included the brand new land use map that changed not only Site C, but also a couple other individual sites that we had votes over, where quite a few of you had to recuse yourselves for. So that is incorrect. As far as the design districts go, that change was very much indeed made. You can actually see that change in your packets this evening, as well as the City Council packets that will be available sometime this week for that item that goes July 8th.
Okay.
And
Thank
comment
you.
on that is the design districts that you're pointing to is in our packet tonight, the very last page, which I think we did encourage and want us to correct, not on Oak Street, but I think it was Copenhagen Street, the last parcels there, which I see are corrected on this map.
That is correct.
Okay.
And also, the minutes do reflect, I was the one that made the motion that said that we should approve per your comments, and that is clearly listed on the agenda. Excuse me,
On the minutes.
And anything else? Joni, anything?
No.
Just a general comment on minutes. I think it would be helpful if you could put in, like, even if it's just a one-sentence summary of what somebody said instead of just putting their name in.
Council has previously approved action minutes. It's not intended to be verbatim. So
No, I wasn't-
we record the meetings, and they are available for review. So if there's ever a question of who said what, because inevitably what you get into, and legal counsel can maybe help us out, but inevitably what you get into, well, that's not what I meant, or that's not what I said. And so action minutes, who made the motion, who seconded it, what the vote was, typically all the minutes are intended to reflect.
And just to add a little bit of background to it, one of the agencies that we represented used to have a court reporter present at the Planning Commission meetings to do verbatim minutes. And in addition to the expense, it indicated to the Planning Commission that that was too much. They did not want every word recorded for that. So the action minutes are the happy medium that demonstrate exactly what the action was without getting into an analysis of what people may or may not have meant, without getting into an analysis of exact quotations and so on. But it is the record of exactly what happened during the meeting.
Right, I understand that, but, I mean, even if you just put next to the name the topic that they addressed, it's a suggestion, it would be helpful to me, rather than having to go back and look through all the videos. You know, sometimes this meetings last a couple hours, and they're difficult to fast forward through. Anyways, it's just a suggestion, and maybe it's just me and nobody else is concerned. And then just two other things, minor things. The city attorney's name is Taylor, not Tyre. And Dr. Caslow spells his name with a K, not a C. So any further questions on either the minutes or the major project lists? If not, could I get a motion to approve the consent items as presented?
Move approval of the consent items.
I'll second.
And I'd like to just note the spelling changes. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Passes 4-0. Okay, moving on to item 6A. Since there is no item.
There it is.
5, yeah, 6A. Oh, no, I missed, any ex parte communications? None? Okay, no public hearings, discussion items, item 6A. Could we have a staff report, please?
Yes, thank you. I have a presentation this evening. Oh, there we go. So this evening, it's a zoning ordinance workshop. You're not making any recommendations this evening to the city council. It's simply to go over the potential amendments that are before you. The package that was given to you is incomplete. There are errors. I'll be the first one to tell you that. However, it is more of a larger picture item in terms of did we get it correct. This is also a portion of it's going to the DRC on July 18th. That portion is mainly pertaining to the objective design standards, as well as one other ordinance change in regards to sidewalk seating design standards. So the intention there is to bring this back to you in its completed form, to provide a recommendation then to the city council, and then on for their review and approval. So the framework for the potential amendments is one of the city council's primary goals for the 24-26 fiscal cycle is to streamline the entitlement and building process. So as I've mentioned before, the general plan, which a lot of folks have really focused in on, as they should, over the last few years, it's only the framework. Right? That's all it is. It's just a bunch of policies, goals, objectives. That's it. No more, no less. It's a policy document. Policy documents can be changed. There's no framework in terms of ordinance writing. But what it does do is it lay out a roadmap to what we need to do to make it law for the city of Solvang. The adopted zoning ordinance has remained virtually the same since its adoption in 1990, sans a couple revisions here and there. Nothing spectacular to that matter. But what you see in your existing ordinance is essentially what has been adopted well over 30 years ago. The commission in May provided direction to staff on the proposed amendments. We provided sort of a very similar workshop format in terms of definitions, entitlement processing, et cetera. The consensus was that city staff go back and revise definitions, land uses, et cetera, and bring back a package to you. Well, we coupled that with additional work that we were going to bring with as a part of the general plan update. But we slowed down a little bit based on the advisement of our attorneys. So what you see before you this evening is more of a complete package. And so I'll get into what this package entails, again, in a very much more broader overview. So first off, zoning amendments. So these amendments are actually for consistency with the proposed general plan that is scheduled to have a public hearing on July 8th for the city council. Once the city council does adopt, if the city council does adopt the general plan, now we will have a new general plan land use map, and we will need to then conform that land use map with the underlying zoning, which is, again, the nuts and bolts and the rules and regs that we actually have to live by. So based on the direction that was given by your body, we are proposing to combine 20R1 and DR18 into a residential low-density zone with a minimum lot size of 20,000 square feet per acre. And again, that was direction directly from this commission. Also, consolidation of 7R1, 8R1, and DR7 into a residential medium density or R2 zone. Combine DR8, DR12, DR16, and DR20 into a residential high-density zone. For consistency with the proposed general plan, create an ag tourist zone specifically for the Alisal Ranch. Eliminate the ag district and replace it with various open space districts and or parks. Eliminate the recreation district and replace it with a park district. And rename various other districts to better align with their actual uses, providing Solvang its own zoning identity. So what that means is, again, we adopted our ordinance pretty much verbatim from Santa Barbara County. And again, this has been 30 plus years. So looking to just more streamline and make it easier for the layperson to pick up the zoning map and kind of understand what's what. So that's why you have a set of name changes in terms of retail, commercial, here in the village, professional office, et cetera. In addition to that, we are proposing the color schemes be changed. Those color schemes are to conform with good land use practices in terms of pretty much every other jurisdiction in the country uses sort of the same color schemes: yellow for residential, red for commercial, purplish for mixed use and or offices, blue for public institutions, green for parks, and lighter green for open space. Again, just trying to just have a little bit more conformity so that when someone looks at a zoning map, they kind of understand what those uses are automatically, or real estate professionals, et cetera, rather than trying to look up what the heck the pink means because they have no idea what it means because they've never seen it on a map. So again, those are the two big changes. Also, with this zoning map changes, you'll see the various other changes that were proposed, that were recommended to you by, to the city council for land use amendments. So as you can see, the blue in the middle is that proposed Santa Ynez mission. It comes out as brown on the screen, and I apologize, but in your packet should be a cross-hatched of red and green for open space. The site that was mentioned earlier, public comments, site 3 or site C, you can see that's divided up between the R3 that's in bold and the yellow that's there. So again, that's consistent with your recommendation to the council. So again, a lot of these changes were made in conformity with the proposed land use map that goes before the city council on July 8th. So now moving into the actual body of texts. So chapter 1 is proposed, is currently titled as reserved. As much as I tried going through the history of our zoning ordinance change, I couldn't pinpoint an exact date of when chapter 1 became a reserved chapter. My guess is when the zoning ordinance actually got moved. Originally it was known as chapter 14, and then for whatever reason got moved to chapter 11. So couldn't find that, and then I'm going to assume that's when that deed was done. But again, chapter 1 is proposed to be complete unreserved at this point, with new ordinance language, essentially setting up our zoning ordinance and why we have it. Chapter 2 is proposed to be repealed and replaced with a purpose and applicability chapter. This is intended for what I call good housekeeping, to ensure clear rules for regulation of administration of the zoning ordinance, applicability of the code, conflicts and rules of interpretation. So conflicts and rules of interpretation are currently missing from our code. That is very much a tool that most planning managers and or directors need in order to make decisions that are for the benefit of not only that is consistent with the general plan, but also the zoning ordinance itself. Right now, the rules of the rules of interpretation and or conflicts are left before the planning commission and sometimes the city council, thereby rendering certain decisions having to wait a while to hit a public hearing and then have this public hearing when it could be very clear and concise and that decision made. Chapter 3 is known as the definitions chapter. So as you see in your staff report, city staff has updated numerous definitions for consistency with proposed land uses, updated definitions based on state statutes, and elimination of uses that are no longer used or no longer intended to meet the vision of the proposed general plan. Chapter 4 is proposed to be renamed, repealed, and replaced. So the existing chapter is considered development standards, but again, in practice, it contains policies and other general plan policy items that are better served or located in what we call the supplemental regulations chapter, or chapter 12. The proposed chapter has been renamed Establishment and Designation of Zones, that clearly defines each zone, its general plan implementation within a table, and a set of new general requirements, and provides users information on how to interpret the allowed use tables, which are subsequently in the next chapters 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So what you see is a snippet of what on the screen is a snippet of what's in your staff report. So the table on the left-hand side is considered the allowed use table. I know the text is very small. However, the uses are now put into a table into an easier to read sort of form that basically outlines residential uses, recreational uses, transportation infrastructure, service uses, retail uses, et cetera. This does a twofold change. One, it allows for the easement of staff to be able to look up a use at an instantaneous level, whether at the counter, in the field, et cetera, and allow for make a determination right then and there. Two, it's ease for the reader. So when normally we have at times questions of, well, what allowed use, what uses are allowed in the TRC zone? So not only do we have to go to the TRC chapter, but we also have to flip over to chapter 16, which then has a huge laundry list of conditional uses that could potentially also be included. Oh, hey, and by the way, in the bulk of the text of chapter 6, or excuse me, chapter 7, there's also uses that are embedded in there. So they're in every which way. So this is, again, intended to consolidate and place into one place all the land use, all the proposed uses within each zone. And as you can see, the zones are actually grouped together. So we have our residential zones in one table, our commercial industrial zones in another table, our public uses in another, parks and space, et cetera. The table on the right-hand side is what we consider the development standards. And again, very similar. We have to chase down where these standards are at. Sometimes the standards are built in the supplemental regulation section. Sometimes they're built into the actual underlying zone. Again, this provides a handy table that we can hand out if we need to, with every single zone listed, and includes the development standards for basic setbacks, side setback, introducing what's called the street side setback. Believe it or not, we actually don't have a street side setback, which was very odd. And what a street side setback means is basically a corner lot. So you have a lot that's fronted by a primary street and a secondary street. Corner lot makes sense. You usually have a greater setback or a lesser setback on that side. Just because you don't want a building so close to the street. That's non-existent in our code. So we're just updating it to sort of make sense of it all. And then again, including lot requirements and other standards, and also calling out sections where we can quickly refer to them. So as you see, the landscaping and fencing and wall sections, it provides our city staff the ability, particularly in the planning and building department, to be able to quickly find those regulations in our code based on discussions that we have with our customers. So again, this really is more of an ease of use for city staff, but also for the end user. One of the bigger changes is also an introduction of what I call overlay zones. So it incorporates the specific Plan 2 overlay zone, or the SB2, which was adopted by the City Council back in the early 90s. For whatever reason, we've lost touch in terms of the actual underlying zone and land use designations for that area of town. City staff, upon research, brought that back up. Those were part of your changes as a part of the general plan recommendation, is to be consistent with the actual adopted ordinance that was given. The second is introducing 2 design district overlay zones for consistency with the new community character element. So what that means is we are proposing, as a part of this amendment, introducing language based on the discussion we had from May to do a sort of what I call a stopgap. And that stopgap is to introduce objective design standards in both the Mission District Overlay Zone as well as the Village Overlay Zone. So it was intended then to provide us clear sort of set of objectives in terms of design elements to move forward. As a part of the 24-26 work effort cycle, we are going to be going out doing an RFP, or request for proposal, to bring in a consultant to help articulate those in a lot greater fashion, as well as helping us with residential objective design standards. But for the time being, we felt that it was rather prudent to have these and get these done now, at least in a very much more crude form, knowing, and again, of my mantra that this is never set in stone, and we're able to revisit this in a year or 2 years, et cetera. We should always be constantly revisiting this code section. And again, what this does is it lays out the groundwork and the foundation to codify these things that our GPAC members and the folks that worked on the GPAC and the folks that worked on the general plan update so hard not see go to waste, because we've elected to just punt this and not do objective design standards ASAP off the chute. So the DRC will be given this section in July. Finally, I'm looking for direction on setting up language to allow for what's called future plan development overlays, or PDs. These just allow for more flexibility in design. It doesn't necessarily mean that a plan development overlay will be approved in the future, but it allows for that creativity. So again, as much as we're trying to be flexible, trying to be forward-thinking with this new code update, a plan development overlay may be necessary for future development, simply because, and that may give the flexibility to say preserve open space, but you get a cluster of units, et cetera. That's currently not written in this code. Currently, the way it's written, you'd have to go through a specific plan process, which creates a lot of time, energy, and effort. Plan development overlay is much simpler. but still involves that heavy-handed of design and exchanges, et cetera, where we can find creativity in design and site planning, and the city gets usually something in return, whether it's affordable housing covenants or additional open space or additional public spaces, additional parks, et cetera. There's always a give and take in return for plan development overlays. Again, this is something for your consideration. If you do want to go down that route, now is the time to write that in. But again, it doesn't necessarily mean that a plan development overlay will go forward anytime soon. It just provides that ability to move forward. Parking in Chapter 11, parking is an issue around here.
Really?
We are proposing amendments to make clear distinction of where parking can be located. Believe it or not, it's not very clear where you can actually park vehicles right now. So again, trying to ensure that it's a clear and concise in a manner that we can easily point to and say, no, parking is not allowed in this setback, period, end of story. Not necessarily something that goes to the commission, because that's the way it's written right now, which again, cost a homeowner time, money, and energy in a fight that they might not necessarily do, where if it's very clear and concise, thou shalt not park at the front setback, then thou shalt not park at the front setback. Including a table to match our uses. So again, the parking is now is proposed to be shown in a tableized form that matches the land use table. So if you go to the categories, you should be able to match the exact parking of where that's at. And finally, there is a proposed amendment language that I do want to bring to your attention, and it's something that we, myself and Lisa, we struggle with constantly, and we hear it from property owners, we hear it from potential business owners and folks wanting to open up shop, is this idea of what's called a change in use. So I'm going to give a scenario here, Aaron, I'm not pointing you out. Yep.
What is it called?
Change in use.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm just going to throw a scenario out here. Joni, you are a property owner of a building here in the TRC. That building was permitted sometime in the 1960s, so that means it meant whatever parking regulations were completed at the time. Now, we have a set up an allowed use table that's there that allows for, say, retail uses and or a day spa. So let's just say your space right now is set up for a retail space. But the retailer decides to go out of business, retire, et cetera, and now you have a very large open space that you want to lease out. And so you have a potential restaurateur that comes in, likes your space, and they want to lease it out. And so you, as a good landlord, says, well, you should go talk to the city first to see what's the permitting look like. The permitting today looks like this. If there are no changes to the facade, fantastic. We can typically approve a land use approval with the building permit. But there's one problem is now we got to park the thing. And in order to park that thing when there's no parking, that will basically derail the restaurant, because now there's only a certain amount of parking that's available. There's only a certain amount of parking credit that's available. But again, the building was constructed with, at the time, meeting the parking standards of the village. And at that time, they assumed a certain percentage of parking, period, for whatever use it was. So what this does is twofold. One, you can't rent it out to a restaurateur, which means we have a vacant storefront. Two, it hampers economic development, because we're chasing parking, we're chasing tables, we're coming up with creative ideas of what constitutes a table. Is it a long bar? Is it a small table? We're chasing numbers all day long. For ultimately the end is we're dictating how a business runs the amount of tables based on parking. So the idea is simple. It assumes that the existing building was permitted, met the parking standards. The proposed language would not require any additional parking for a change that is an allowed use. So what that means is we would no longer be chasing those parking numbers. If you want to open a restaurant as an allowed use, then open it up. Go through a tenant improvement. Get the kitchen, get all that stuff done through a building permit. But you don't have to sit here and worry about parking anymore, because that's the economic development that we're looking to have. Now, there are exceptions to this. The exception is first is a hotel and lodging unit. That we got to park. Sorry, got to do that all day long. Also, the exception is for new buildings, new additions. So if you're doing an addition of more than 500 square feet, and that actually has increased, by the way. Currently, it's set at 300. I can't tell you why it's set at 300. I have no clue. But typically, a good practice is setting it with a number that makes sense out of the building code. 500 square feet is typically the magical number in the building code. Once you're over 500 square feet in the building code, now you require a whole bunch of other studies. That includes geotech, soil, structural engineering. There's a whole bunch of other things that you have to do because 500 square feet is a pretty large project. Normally, a good practice to streamline development, to streamline economic development, is to tie it to an actual real number that starts kicking in additional regs from a building code standpoint, implementation standpoint. So we are proposing to increase that 300 to 500 because, again, makes sense. 500 is about the even keel for the building code, tying that together. But so, again, that's the change in use. That's a rather large change. And right now, our code is built to say, if you want to add a back patio, you can add a back patio. You don't have to do a development plan, and you don't got to go to DRC. That's perfectly fine, but you still got to park it. I mean, we got to. It's either you accept it or you don't. It's either you allow for the exception or you don't. You pull it back. And so again, it's looking at our village, looking at our economic development, trying to reduce those barriers to get open, particularly in our village, trying to provide for visitors, trying to provide for residents. This is one idea that would do that. And again, it's only the existing buildings, would not affect any of the new construction. And the same thing would go for our retail commercial zone, the shopping center, the Nielsen Center, because again, imagine trying to go in there. We got to, every time someone, gets a new lease there, we have to go calculate parking for it. Is that something that we're willing to let go for the good of having additional businesses that serve our residents and serve our community? So I'll pose that question to you, but I thought I'd bring it to your attention. So next up is just a couple slides of just overall general changes. Particularly, these are coming to Chapter 12, which is our supplemental regulations chapter. So there's an inclusion of an ADU section. So currently we have second unit and guest house sections. Those would all be combined, reformed into an ADU section that includes basic objective standards. The ADU section is in conformance with state law. So that's the biggest key. And those state laws have been changing each and every year. This would likely be a section that gets updated each and every year based on the new legislation that comes up. The child care and daycare standards have also been revised per state law. These standards were, I believe, don't quote me on this, updated in 2021 to streamline child care and daycare centers to allow for these more in what we call by right situations. Our code is woefully antiquated and does not allow certain situations by right. The state has come down and says child care is a much needed aspect to facets of life. From a personal standpoint, I wholeheartedly agree with that. As a person who had children go through childcare. So the easier we make it, the better. The density bonus section has been completely revised per state law. It's, so again, that's just trying to be our good housekeeping, ensuring that if a developer wants to come in and not look up all the state law and just go right to our code, it outlines how to get a density bonus project done. The ag employee housing section has been partially changed. Again, ag employee housing is more of a by right issue, so we're changing that as well. We added a SB 330 processing, that's in Chapter 16, as well as the variances revised that as well. So updates to promote economic development. I did touch on the parking issue. Others are revision to our home occupation permits. Our home occupation permits have not been touched since 1990. Unfortunately, faxing things have kind of died. I don't know about you, but I think I faxed something like 4 years ago, and even then, had a really hard time finding a fax machine. But again, streamlining the requirements of who needs one, allow for more handcrafted uses, more uses out of working from the home. Home occupations are some of the biggest single incubators of economic development for any community. Again, trying to streamline that process, provide for processes that are just not necessarily outside the box, but just common sense of, can I use my backyard for, can I use my front yard for a gym? No. Could I use it can I use my garage and turn it into one personal training? Yeah, sure, as long as you're able to park it. Those type of things, again, trying to incubate that economic development because there are so many success stories out there in the United States in terms of businesses that started in a garage or in a home. So no need to over-regulate that. Live entertainment and nightclub regulations have been included as we've updated that definition. And then again, just the general overall update of definitions as well. So streamlining updates, these are more so sort of back of house and procedure updates. This is more functioning of Chapter 16, is the elimination of the land use permit. There's a whole host of things that you would have to do for a land use permit. We don't need to do that anymore. As long as it meets the setbacks, the standard, the parking, et cetera, we should be able to issue what's called a zoning clearance. It gets documented, it gets signed on a single piece of paper. We've actually already begun this process in terms of just providing a checklist of what you need for a land use permit in terms of generalized. Again, that's all available on our website. So again, these can be completed over the counter or with building permits, trying to make life a lot easier instead of going through this monotonous amount of paperwork for no apparent reason. The elimination of the development plan and reimagining this as a development permit, because that's really what it is. You approve a development plan, but in actuality, you're actually approving a permit. So call it for what it is, a development permit. So this allows for the planning manager to determine for items to be required. So currently, all the items for requirement for a development plan are codified. Instead, we would do this through checklists, which actually are available on our website for a development plan, and then minimize submittal requirements for smaller projects. Because right now, our code doesn't differentiate the difference between a development plan for change of use versus a development plan for a large project. You got to do the same thing. So let's, again, help out a little bit. And let's be able to say, look, if you're just changing a floor plan, just give me a floor plan. I don't need your elevations. I don't need you to go get an architect. I don't need you to go get a landscaping plan. I don't need you to go get me a geotech engineer soils report, because that's what's required of it right now. Again, looking for flexibility, looking for streamlining of the process. We're codifying the temporary use permit. It's alluded to on many, many spaces of our code, but it doesn't exist. I don't know why. What this does, it allows for temporary uses such as amplified music as an accessory use. You do see there's some standard development items on there in terms of decibels, hours of operation, et cetera. If you meet those criteria, we can issue you a temporary use permit. And again, this helps out a lot of our other businesses that have been asking for having amplified music, having the ability to track a temporary use permit, provide conditions, and if they go ahead and violate the temporary use permit and the conditions, we can always revoke it. That's the fun part about it. Well, revoking's not fun, but it just makes life a lot easier. And then this again allows staff to condition it, revoke it in a quicker fashion. And then codifying what I call the pre-application review. So it's kind of in our code, it's kind of not in our code, but really what this does is sets up the ability to get a complete review by city staff before you submit an application. So this is actually a tool that jurisdictions utilize for larger projects where you're able to give me a site plan, a very rudimentary floor plan, just some elevations. We take a look at it, not only us as planning and building staff, but Roger and Cole from Public Works, Nathan from Mike Matthews from Utilities, Stephanie from Building, Wildan. We take a look at it. We usually take about 30 days, and we get you back a letter. I call it a letter, but it's really what I call a roadmap. It's a roadmap of how to get this thing entitled and where you need to go. We point out some major infrastructure issues that your project may or may not face. We point out potential CEQA issues that may come about. We point out other issues that you might have fallen flat on your standards from objective design standards. Those things are all given to you. So that way, then as a developer, you're able to then say, yeah, I want to move forward with this project, or B, no, I got to retool it because I got to meet my pro forma. Thank you for telling me that I needed to go upgrade a 8-inch water main to a 12-inch water main. And that's a massive thing to know up front versus submitting it to planning and then your project dies because that was never discussed. Again, it's codifying this process. We have a fee for it already. We kind of already do it a little bit, but it just makes it really official of what the expectations are, what the timeframes are, and make sure we fee it correctly. And finally, establishing time limits for entitlements. That's one of the first things I noticed is, well, what's the time limit for this for entitlement? And we have none. So we can have entitlements run perpetually forever. This gives us a time limit. It's proposing 5 years. from the date of entitlement. So you get an automatic 2 years usually, and then from there, every year you have to apply, and then year 5 is your last year. And then from there, if you want to move forward with the project, you got to go through the entitlement process. Now, there is a caveat there that if it has to do with any sort of federal or state processing, so say you need a federal 401 or 404 permit for riverbed stream alteration, yeah, we recognize that takes a long time, so we'll give you more time. But as long as you have that federal or state agency that's involved, we'll give you more time. But again, it's really trying to think forward of certain applications that have been around for a while. A great example is the Atterdag Inn. I had a conversation with the applicants on Friday about whether they wanted to extend it for a 6th year, and they were shocked that they could still extend it. I told them, yeah, still need an application, 5 o'clock on Monday, you'll still be good to go. They didn't submit an application, by the way. But again, even that's shocking to the design professional that it was still alive. Now, the time limits don't circumvent state law, particularly subdivision. So typically during recessions, the state law and the state legislature really likes to extend subdivision maps. So we would then need to bake in, if that were to get extended, automatically would extend whatever other entitlements go with it. So that was a note I made to myself, and I figured I'd tell you guys about it. So that was a lot. Again, this is a workshop. No right or wrongs here, but it's a lot because our code needs a lot of help to modernize it, streamline it, and get to where we need to go. And again, my biggest mantra is we need to make it Solvang's code, not Santa Barbara County, not San Ynez Valley, Solvang. This is where we start. So I'll open up to Commissioner questions.
Does anybody have any questions? I think more of a general nature at this point before we go to public comment. Clarifications or?
Actually, I wanted a clarification on one thing. When you were using Joni's property as an example, and you talked about parking, what if the property is sold? I mean, the original building was built in 1960. Those parking restrictions go with the sale of the building?
Oh, well, there's no covenant that's recorded, so it's there. It's an existing building.
So it's there?
Yeah,
So it's there for-
regardless of
okay.
owner, it's there. And
Great.
And again, that's a tool that we are sorely, in my professional opinion, we're sorely missing now. You guys are here to debate that, so you can tell me to go home. And it'll be okay.
Not yet.
I won't hate you.
Okay, well, with that, we'll go to public comment. I have one speaker slip from Art George.
Yeah, in my 3 minutes, I've covered just 4 general questions that we have and 4 specific questions that we have. First, the current draft provisions, are they the only provisions that are going to cover ADUs, or will other provisions about ADUs be sprinkled around in other parts of the municipal code? We'd like to understand that. Second, the city's earlier ADU ordinance voiced a desire to shape ADUs in Solvang so as to preserve the city's architectural and historical integrity to the extent allowed under state law. There's nothing about that in the current draft, which I'd like to hear that the city still has that same position. Third, state law requires local ADU ordinances to designate the areas where ADUs are permitted and implicitly where they're not. Is Solvang planning to do this, or will the ADUs be permitted like in any residential area, or at least those zoned for single-family homes? I'd like to clarify that. Fourth, will the draft or the ordinance as adopted be submitted to Sacramento, which has reviewed other cities' ADU regulations? The draft contains at least a couple provisions similar to those in other city ordinances that Sacramento has already rejected. For example, the draft requires the counter of an efficiency kitchen to be at least 30 inches wide. Builton tried to impose a similar minimum, but Sacramento rejected it. as too restrictive because the state law requires only a counter of reasonable size, quote unquote. As to the specific questions, regarding JADUs, the state law requires the filing of a deed restriction that runs with the land, which prohibits selling the JADU separately from the primary dwelling. The draft doesn't require this, apparently relying on state law, and mentions only that a covenant agreement, quote unquote, requiring owner occupancy of either the primary dwelling or the JADU must be recorded. The draft doesn't mention anything about the separate sales restriction. Second, well, so in that regard, the draft is confusing. I think it should be clarified. Second specific comment, the question then arises whether the same prohibition on separate sales and corresponding deed requirement should be imposed in the case of ADUs. State ADU law prohibits such separate sales with a couple minor exceptions. Accordingly, many cities do include this prohibition and deed requirements for ADUs, as do HOAs in their own ADU regulations. I only have a little bit.
Okay,
What?
Go ahead and finish.
Yeah, it's only 30 seconds. For purposes of the square footage minimums and maximums, how is this going to be calculated? For tax purposes, square footage is calculated based on the entire footprint of the structure, including the thickness of the exterior walls. We recommend the same approach here in order to avoid abuses. The restriction should also clarify about porches, stoops, steps, patios, solar panels, et cetera, whether that's included in the calculation. And finally, how does California's solar mandate, which applies to detached ADUs, be implemented for ADUs in Solvang? The draft doesn't say anything, but the mandate does accord a fair amount of flexibility in its implementation, for example, on regarding a city's geographic location, the climate zone, available surface area on the ADU, et cetera, and different cities adopt different requirements. So it'd be interesting to see what Solvang might require here. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak? Dennis?
Thank you. This will be really easy. I realize the ordinance is a work in progress. I'm just recommending that you use exactly the same nomenclature. For instance, with the design overlays, or the overlays, sometimes they're called village area overlay, which is consistent with the general plan, but sometimes they're called Solvang Village overlay, and that's inconsistent with the general plan. I just urge you to use exactly the same nomenclature that the general plan uses for certainly the design districts. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anybody else here? No? Anybody online that would like to speak? I don't see any hands up. So we'll bring it back to the commission for discussion. Anybody like to make any comments or?
Well, I think there were just some good, questions, comments raised regarding ADUs and JADUs, and I didn't know if Raphael had a comment on that.
Yeah.
But I'll bet he does.
I'll tackle each one. So the current job provisions of the city plans to issue, this is it. The state's kind of covered most of it as ad nauseum. The reality is we've just included just really rudimentary objective design standards, because this dovetails into number 2 is the city's earlier 2020 draft ADU ordinance, and I wasn't around for that, is preserve the city's architectural historic integrity. So the general plan, and again, the 2020 ADU ordinance clearly was well before the general plan. The general plan is really put in the 2 design district cores, the Mission and the Village area. And those are very clear. If you're a new structure, you're doing those guidelines, period. So in those, it's very clear. Now, outside of that, the general plan says there's not much outside of that, so therefore we're reflecting that. we're reflecting what the general plan says. So the 2020 ADU ordinance, that was 4 years ago. In the world of ADUs, that's like utilizing a rotary phone. It changes that much. And so, unfortunately, that's where we're at, because then we would sit there and we're going to have to then dictate how one, does their design in the neighborhood. And now then what's the difference between that and a single unit dwelling? We don't have those standards yet. Now, could we get those standards in the future? Absolutely. As a part of the work effort, we most certainly can revisit the ADU standards. But we as city staff felt something is better than nothing right now. And right now we have nothing. So I'd rather not have blank walls and be as rudimentary as possible and be able to get those completed. Now, as far as the, in terms of state law requires local ADUs to designate areas, state law has actually been pretty clear post-2020. If you are allow for a single unit dwelling or single family dwelling, or a multi-unit dwelling or multifamily dwelling, or mixed if you have to allow an ADU. It's reflected in your land use tables as well. So it's very crystal clear. We don't need to designate areas. If those three are allowed and permitted in any three, you got to allow an ADU, period. So again, that's reflected in your tables. The draft ordinance submitted for HCD review, it will be once it's completed. If HCD comes back and says we need to make a change, we'll make a change. As far as the counter the efficiency, 30 inches, that's actually straight out of the building code. So unless HCD doesn't know their building code very well, I don't know what to tell you. As far as the specific questions regarding JADUs, we utilize the term covenant agreement, but the covenant agreement is about the same. Thou shalt have an owner occupancy that runs with the property, not with the owner. And then the agreement would also state that it would also not be sold and conveyed separately. Again, that's state law. That's what will be included in it. But I can never tell you what state law cooks up every now and again, and they're cooking more stuff up this summer, so trust me, it's on the plate. So again, that's why we kind of kept it vague and more simplistic versus re-amending and re-amending and re-amending. Same with prohibition of ADUs, ADUs in general, same thing. You basically can't subdivide, you can't legally subdivide it today, just yet, but it is currently pending in the legislature. So again, that's why we use covenant agreement, really to cover that. HOA do their own ADU regulations. That's a private agreement. We're not getting into that realm. State law has been very clear. You got a CCNR and HOA, they don't care. You can do your ADU. And so if you want to do that battle with your HOA, go right ahead and go do that. As far as square footage maximum minimums, those are calculated per the definitions, and those are included in net versus gross in our definitions. So those are already defined on how to calculate those. Solar mandate, that's in the building code. Again, that's state law. We're silent on it. We're going to let the building code do its thing. It is in the new iteration of the California Building Code, the 2022 edition, it does require detached ADUs to have, or to no longer be solar ready, but also include it. So that's also driving up the cost of ADUs. But again, our code is silent because it's letting the state law and the building code do its own thing. So I think that hopefully answers those questions.
Thank you very much.
Just a comment about the 2020 ADU. Some of us participated in that, and we had several meetings on that, and basically we threw up our hands and said, no matter what we want to do, the state says no.
Right.
So in the end, we just said, our ADU policy is whatever the state says we have to do.
And we can continue to do that. We can say, you know what, we'll just let the state dictate its thing. But from a principle of design, it's one of those things where you can mandate as long as it's objective, and it's objective in here to say, hey, if your ADU is facing the street, thou got to connect it with a sidewalk and have a porch on it or some sort of articulation, and it's defined. It also says you can't have a blank wall. That's the last thing someone wants to see is a blank wall. So every 25 feet, have a window. These are just little things that, again, rather than just having a square box, you're able to then, through objective standards, you say, okay, I will have a window every 25 feet on the plane. Done. There's no debating about color. We're not debating about the style. But it's very basic, rudimentary, objective standards in the ADU standards. Again, just to give it more humanity of the ADU. And it alludes to the heights and setbacks. If you go up 25, then you got to meet certain setbacks. If you go below 18, you can then meet the state standard of 4 feet on the side, 4 feet on the rear, et cetera. Those are all caked in already, and they're presented in the ADU ordinance.
Okay, I just wanted to clear up how we got there. Anything else, Keith? Aaron?
Well, I mean, are we, I don't understand our process, I guess. Are we starting at page 1 and talking about it? We're gaveling and going home? We're going to do it next time? Are we going through page by page? What are you looking for? I mean, I've got, and I'll just say it outright, I got it on Friday. I have a busy weekend. I couldn't get through all this stuff, but I have got loads of notes and questions and stuff. I don't go typos because that's not my style, but there's a lot of things. Do we want, is that what we're doing tonight, or are we, okay.
Yeah, that's very much what we're doing tonight is to get some of those questions fleshed out. And again, a couple of other overarching items. I know it's a lot.
I couldn't get through it all, and I'm a pretty quick reader, but it was and no fault to you guys. It's a lot of work, but, I got it on Friday, and it's summer, it's holidays, and it's, holy smokes, it's a lot of stuff to do. It was difficult, and perhaps what I would love to see is it in its final form. I know this isn't the final form, but just the layout of it. There's a lot of line out, and I'm going, wait, did that one go here? And that's a B. Wait, I got to go back. Is that an A over here? And I know you did your best to show us what was coming out and what was coming in. And maybe we could get one that's just the coming in, and then you still use this as the reference of what was coming out, if you know what I mean. So we can get a flow from it. Your overview when you opened was very helpful to go through what stages we're at, and I could see which ones you threw out completely and where we moved them over to a different section. But that would be helpful in a review also. But yeah, if we're going to go, what do you, I don't know, what does the commission want to do? Or other
Well,
questions and comments? I don't want to jump the gun.
I have a general comment, and one thing I'd like to see in the next iteration, if not in the next iteration, in whatever the final iteration is a consistency in formatting. I mean, some of these sections, like the first one where it says Title 11 zoning regulations, very clearly laid out. I like the format. And basically, in compliment to you, Raphael, in the sections that are new that you added, they're formatted very well. With a title, then a subset, and keep going down. But things that you kept in from the existing,
The Dark Ages.
Yeah.
it's almost impossible to read because everything is on the same level. You don't know what is subordinate to each other. And so I'd like to see, and I've said this before, I mean, when we've reviewed these ordinances with past planning managers, we've brought this up, but nothing's ever happened. So since we're doing such a drastic rewrite, it seems like now would be a really good time to standardize on format. And I don't know what the right format is. I like what Raphael has done in some of the areas. But I don't know if you have a editorial staff or somebody you can farm it out to go through, and I don't know if this is in like Microsoft Word or what.
It's in Word, and it is difficult because we're taking something that was originally on a typewriter and putting it. The company provides it for us. But no, I hear you, and I also am equally frustrated. So,
Okay,
but
yeah, I
that
can
gives me
imagine
more
you were.
latitude.
Yeah. So, just I can go through here in you know, a lot of my comments are on formatting, so I said that up front, so I won't do it again. But on 11-1-2, you talked about the planning and building manager. It's 16.
Thank you.
So shouldn't it just be the office of the planning manager? Since I don't think we call it the planning and building department anymore.
Yeah,
And that
need
props
to-
up a couple times.
right, we need
in
to,
here.
and that's something I need to talk to Randy about, what is this, the department division? So that's just, I'll note that as a clarification to ensure that it's, you know,
Okay.
find and seek once it's done.
Yeah, and I happened to turn the page, and there it is again on page 18. A question on page 19. It talks about the review authority, but I couldn't find any definition in the definitions of what the review authority is.
Jack, again.
Page 19.
What paragraph?
11-2-4C, minimum requirements. As may be determined by the review authority, be necessary to promote appropriate land use and development.
The review authority is actually defined in the definitions, and again,
So it's possible I missed it.
the individual or office, the individual or official city body, planning manager, design review committee, planning commission, or city council, identified by the zoning code as having the responsibility and authority to review and approve, disapprove development applications described in chapter 16.
I'd have believed if you just told me it was in definition, you didn't have to read it.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too, is normally definitions are either right up front or usually way in the back. So good to know that we have a little bit of blessing of latitude there. And again, looking for more high level questions. So formatting, department, we'll need to go through that. But it just is there something that's hanging out there that, you know, discussions versus the formatting versus a period versus an X that's missing a section number. And I want, you know, I understand getting it on a Friday or getting on a Thursday afternoon. It's a lot. So I tried to get this back to you as quickly as I could.
Okay, and that vein on page 20, the item 3, it says, talks about approved permit before the expiration of the permit or actual time extension. Does that mean that if a project has a time extension and it runs out, that they can't apply for another extension?
Yes. So we'll take the Adderdag, if they come in tomorrow with an application and a fee, it expired.
So they would have to start all over again?
Yep.
Okay, well, that was my question.
And can I, while we're on that, Jack, my understanding is that the reason we have a timeline of the years is because perhaps they did a traffic study which no longer is applicable. It could be outdated, or whatever that study is, or we don't have the sewer capacity, or water mains need to be now updated because you let 4 other projects occur before you. Is that, it has to have an expiration?
You've hit the nail on the head on why there are time limits, and one of them CEQA. It's a big one. You know, unfortunately, I've been a part in a past life of a project that, you know, utilized a CEQA, you know, document from 1989. And we
From
were
when?
processing it from, I'm not going to name them, but we were processing it in 2010. And it was like, okay.
There's no application here, yeah.
Right. So, and that is the main reason is things change over time, and again, perpetually continuing to allow something that if they don't. And the other thing too is that, you know, it is one thing to apply for a permit, and if it dies, it dies. There's nothing wrong with that. Letting it live to live is what it is.
On page 26, where it talks about bar, tavern, you know, it says it includes bars, taverns, pubs, and similar establishments by reference, does that automatically include wine bars? I know
That's fine
tasting
separately.
rooms are addressed
Yeah. well,
separately.
Yeah, taste, well, that's a whole alcohol beverage control issue. And if you
Yeah.
want to direct staff to be more specific in terms of the licensure, we can get down to the licensure level.
Okay, well, I noticed he mentioned beer and microbreweries. And so that's why I was wondering.
And if you don't mind, if you have a comment on a section that I do, I'd like to also, it's easier than going back, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because I had the same question about it. It does say may also include beer brewing. And I saw there's another section under spirits distillery, and I believe we do not allow, I didn't see a wine making. What am I saying? Am I saying that right? We got brew brewing, we got distillery, I didn't see wine.
It's not
Processing or-
specifically there, it's under artisan.
Okay.
We can bring that out, it's its own definition if you'd like.
Well, only because we're doing the beer, we're doing spirits, and maybe the wine, you know, just so we, and then
there
we've
is
covered
one
everything.
Winery in the city.
Right, and that's also we were very cognizant of, and it's in our industrial, heavy commercial area, and we want to, again, that part of this exercise to make sure that we don't make anything non-conforming, that we want to
So
conform.
you might take a look at it, but
Yeah, we'll take a look at it.
I thought, I read that, and I thought that the wineries were covered there.
The other question I had on that section was the second paragraph. It talks about food services subordinate to the sale. I hate that, subordinate, because they sell less, they have less square footage. I don't know if again, you were mentioning licenses, because the licenses are pretty specific from ABC, that maybe there's a reference to that. I don't know.
Yeah,
There
we
it
could
is.
definitely change it to state that is, food service consistent with the applicable ABC
Perfect,
license.
perfect.
And again, then that's.
Then that changes, it changes.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, good. You have another one coming up?
You know, can I go back to 24 if we have 26 sitting there?
What page?
Definition, page 24. A big new one for us was the ag tourism, obviously, and that's, I'm not opposed to it. I'm just, when I see the first paragraph, first sentence, visitors serving commercial uses that are compatible with agricultural land uses preserve, enhance agriculture district by bringing tourist dollars to supplement sources, income farmers and ranchers by and increasing the demand for locally produced products on the property. I mean, if we're saying it's agritourism, can I go take strawberries from Santa Maria, bring them down, and I'm selling agricultural products? Is that ag tourism? We have this on Alma Pintada, where I know Joni buys her strawberries, and the person doesn't grow a strawberry on that land. She gets them, or he gets them, wherever they get them, and bring them in, and now they from Santa Maria. And so when we're doing ag tourism in our city, just a clarification, we're trying to encourage you to grow it in the city, or is it just you can bring it anywhere and open up a farmer's market stand, basically?
Well, it's specific only to the ag tourist zone, which is the Alsal Ranch. So the definition likely, based on this conversation, needs to be further refined to better reflect the Alsal Ranch operations.
Correct.
Than anything else.
Just so they're not bringing, unless we want them to be able to bring a bunch of produce in from San Joaquin Valley and sell it out there in
That's
stands.
not the intention.
I don't think
that's a
so either.
certified market. The intention, again, is
Yes.
to be able to have
Encourage
service
them.
users you have in this open ranch and or agriculture that's going on currently at the site.
Yes.
So we most certainly we can make refinements.
I would like that, yeah, thank you. I mean, that's just my comment.
No, I think it's good.
Page 30. Again, maybe I missed it, but on the dwelling unit, it talks about constant independent living occupied by or intended for one household on a long-term basis. Do we need to define what long-term is?
Yes, it's already defined as more than 30 days because the short-term rental defines that for us.
So that's, I missed it in the definitions then?
Correct,
Okay.
the short-term rental definition.
And I believe we define household also. I'm 99% sure I saw that, because that was a question, but then I found it later. I had the same question, Jack, on long-term, then I saw the 30-day, long-term, short-term.
On the next page, page 31, talks about extremely low-income households. But do we need to define not only extremely low income, but low and high? Someplace we define median or but not the others. Do we
Low
need
is
to?
defined, and medium is not. Again, these are categories from HCD, so if we missed median, then we'll need to add that in.
No, you didn't miss, it's on page 41. But my question is, should we include high and low as
Well,
opposed to just
High is not an
extremely low and median?
high is not an income category recognized by HCD. It's medium, it's extremely low, low, and very low. Those are it. So those are the ones we'll be defining.
So, but we've only defined two, right?
So if we're missing one, then I'll verify that.
You got extremely low and median that I saw. Yeah, the moderate, I think it's called, is on page 41. Then I got a bunch of nits. One question on page 33, at the very bottom, items 3 and 4, talks about places and states with historic preservation and Secretary of Interior and states without approved programs. How does that apply to Solvang?
It's just the definition of historic places.
I mean, we could get one
We could very much get one.
in a year or 6 months, or,
It's
you know,
just
somebody
defined,
could.
ready to go.
Right.
So if the next council chooses to, do a historic structure list, we would do the work effort. It's already been defined. Some of these definitions are out there. They're already defined, and they're just not. They're ready to go for.
So is California a state with an approved program?
California State. Well, I mean, Mission San Ynez has a state of California approved program.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, my question was not, did we have these programs, but when it talks about in-state, should we say California Secretary of the Interior? And
We most certainly can. Considering it's a definition of Solvang, I would beg to say you kind of already figured out we're in the state of California. But but we can make the change.
Okay, you did mention that there's some sections missing, and that's where the ones where you have the double X's, like live entertainment, on page 35. 11-12-XX live entertainment.
Yeah, and again, those are set up to make sure that we hit those placeholders when
So
it's all done.
that is, they're just placeholders.
Correct.
Okay.
So anytime you see an X or a double X, it's usually a placeholder for us to go back and verify and put the right section in.
While we're on page 35, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
On the lodging, which is the next paragraph down, so definition. So facility with guest room suites with or without kitchens rented to general public transit of less than 30 days. That includes hotels, motels, inns, guest suites, bed and breakfast. Does that mean that somebody cannot rent a hotel room for 31 days and consider it lodging?
Yeah.
So if a hotel can't do it, or they can do it, but it's not called lodging and they can't collect TOT, that's what happens.
That's the reason.
That's the rub,
That's
right?
the rub. So no one says you can't get another room after 30 days.
Right, but if you stay in,
Another 30 days.
but if you stay in that room for, I remember this, something about the snowbirds coming down and wanting a hotel
Stay
room
at
at the
day
Svenska
31,
for-
it is, we can no longer collect transit occupancy tax. and
Correct.
a
You
whole-
can on the first 30, but not after the 30 unless you were to move to a different room and start a whole new rental program. And that's what that is about.
That's why it's there.
Yep, okay. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
And anything else?
Not on that page.
Page 36, lumber and building materials. It reads, retail sales of building materials, including lumber and ornamental brick, stone, comma, provided all materials. I don't understand what that means.
We'll clarify that. So I believe that's a typo on our end. Because it's missing language.
Yeah, it's probably also the stucco or the mortar or yeah, it's all, including all materials that are needed to
Yeah.
build a wall or
Yeah.
something.
Okay, already answered that question. All formatting things again, I talked about that already. Page 61, the agricultural tourist development standards. It's listed as 11-5-4. I think it should be 11-5-3.
Yeah, there is no 11-5-3. I
Yeah,
would agree. I
correct. Yep.
made that mark too.
We'll take care of that.
Okay, I figured that one out for myself.
Can I ask a question while we're on that page 61?
Sure.
I looked at the lot requirements, minimum lot, so on the same section, all the way down, lot requirements, 15 acres gross. The width is 100 and the depth is a minimum of 100. I guess that seems right. I guess it can be 100 wide and it can go for a mile, and it can be 100 deep and it can go a mile up the road or 3 miles,
Or
whatever
you
it
could
is.
say there is no minimum, we call it a day.
That's kind of, because it's confusing because we have our, what is it called? R3, R1, what is it? And they're 100
Yeah.
also.
We can very much just strike those out and leave it as the gross acres, and that way it's done. And
Yeah.
That's no problem. And that's a very legit kind of, well, not to say comments are not legit, but that is a very much a question that if you agree to, then direct city staff to eliminate the minimum lot width, and we much certainly can, and just leave it at the gross acre.
I would, because if it's a flag lot, which a lot of it could be, you're done. It's not a, yeah.
I would agree.
And they can put 20 units per acre on there, right? So they can
Yeah, but it
put
is
like
limited
300 units
to
on
the
there.
allowed use, and that's ag. It's mainly for the ag employee housing, and again, that's done on a by right basis.
And can I ask a question on that? When it says ag housing for ag usage, is it your employees on that property, or can you just house ag people and they're working out in Guayama?
I'm going to turn to the attorneys on that one, on the ag employee housing, because I know that is a very much a state requirement, but I don't know if it's just specifically for the employees or other ag workers.
Can you give me the page that you were referring to again? I was on 61 and I'm looking for the language that you were talking about.
Yeah, I know. We were on 61, but it just dovetailed into, I was asking about that because Jack asked about the 20 per acre. It's got to be on the use.
It's on page 59 and the
59.
use table.
Yeah, use table, there it is. So agricultural employee housing permitted.
Yeah, so under some permit programs like the H-2A program, the agricultural employer is required to provide housing, whether it's on-site or nearby. If it's nearby, not on-site, they're required to provide transportation. So it's somewhat a factor of federal law as to the type of housing, the location where it's going to be required. That would dovetail with it being a permitted use in this particular zone.
Gotcha. So permitted in this zone, and as long as they're ag employees, it could be 5 miles away or 30 miles away because we're trying to keep ag employees housed. Okay. That
Right,
answers
and
that.
so using Santa Maria and Guadalupe as examples, Guadalupe was experiencing a number of single-family residences being rented for H2A purposes. And it was 6 people in a house, so it was the same as a single-family residence. Whereas the city of Santa Maria was converting some of their older hotels into single-room occupancy H2A housing, and there was some concerns about the appropriateness of that use. So this would just clarify the type of use is permitted in this particular type of zone.
Thank you. On page 63, just, and this is more of a general question, it talks about zoning districts. In other places, it talks about district zones. Could you enlighten me of what's the difference between a zone and a district zone and a zoning district?
They're the same thing. They're all the same, just the nomenclature, what you put it. So zoning districts is typically the nomenclature that we want to use, so we'll clean that up.
Okay, yes.
Jack, can I ask a question on that
Oh,
page
certainly.
also? And I'm maybe just dense or I'm not reading it correct. My question at the top of the paragraph was, where is 20R, where's our 20,000 acre? I'm trying to get, where's our half acre zone? So I see the first one is state residential. It starts and it says that 1 dwelling per acre for ER1, 1 dwelling for 3 acres, right, on ER3. The next one is an R1, and that still says not to exceed 1 dwelling per acre. And then the PR, it talks about 2 dwellings per acre, so that's our half acre. I guess the difference is the R1 and the ER1? They're both 1 unit per acre. Am I reading this correctly?
Your R1 is your R1 and your ER1s can both be half acres.
They can be half
Yeah,
acres.
it's just, again, we're looking at maximum densities. So you gotta think of it as in max densities versus the way we used to think of it.
Yeah. Okay, on the R1, though, it can't be half acre. I mean, under this new law, no, it can't. So under the R1, B, accommodate detached residential dwelling units not to exceed 1 per acre. So it's only going to be 1 house per acre,
Right,
right? And the
can't be less.
ER1 is 1 dwelling unit per acre. You can split it according to the California Government Code if something comes up, you get that. But then the PR, again, and here's the funny thing on the PR, is that it says that it typically includes infrastructure and/or open space maintained by financial mechanisms such as in CC&Rs, is what it's saying. But so where is just a half acre zone that doesn't have open spaces maintained by financial mechanisms such as landscape, lighting districts, homeowner associations? I live on a half acre and I don't have that. I mean, it seems like there should be another, just a half acre zone. All of these can be maintained by an HOA or by a government agency or by an association. Any zone could be. Am I reading that wrong?
So the planned residential is your density range up to 2 dwelling units per acre is permitted. So there's your half acre lots right there.
But it has to be a planned residential, I mean, it has to have an HOA or typically, but
I mean, it says typically. That doesn't.
But why would we even put that in there? Why would we say that it's governed by this district?
It's there to actually for Skip Mesa. So that was part of the reason and rationale.
Okay.
So, I mean, you can always take it out, and that's not a problem. I mean, we can just leave it out completely and strike out, HOA, et cetera, and just leave it as is.
I would, because, I mean, D doesn't call an HOA, E doesn't call an HOA, A doesn't call an HOA, and B. It's only in C that it calls for, typically it could be managed by. I don't know. Again, I find more the higher density ones sometimes are probably more, but why no HOA in these? Anyway, I would just think, it's confusing to me, is all I'm saying. Why in that one zone do we mention that?
Yeah, and it's, I mean. it's
Lighting
all-
districts.
It's a function of implementation also at the end, so.
Yeah, right, they're going to have an HOA or they're not, whichever zone.
Right.
But if I read it, I go, gosh, I can only do a half acre if I have an HOA? No, you don't have to. Why does it say that typically? Well, typically, but it doesn't say it in the others. That's
Yeah,
my
no,
point.
it-
So,
That could be struck out.
Okay.
Okay, so we can do that. Good. Any other comments there?
Nope, not on that.
And here's the charts that you showed, which I thought were very good.
Can I ask about that page 65 chart? Lot requirements, building form requirement, then density requirement, lot requirements, right in the middle. We have the R1, which there's the 20,000 square feet, and we have the ER1. Both have the same minimum lot sizes. Is that, I don't know if that's correct. I mean, we have the others go from 40, 30, 60, 80, then these three are all hundreds, the 3 acre, the 1 acre, and the half acre. Is that maybe currently what we have, and that's why we adopted it? I'm assuming.
It's just trying to
More of a
be-
question.
They're just trying to keep them, the intention is to keep those as large lots, really what it is. I mean, we could, in theory, increase the size of the depth or width to equate it out. But
Right.
really, it's just the intention was to
To-
just make sure they're larger than the other things. So
And I'm assuming someone comes in with, again, we don't have a lot of half acre zone lots out there that aren't developed. You come in with one and it's 100 feet, because now my lot goes all the way back to the back, I have to do all acres because I can't go
And
skinny.
remember, it's a minimum.
It's a minimum.
That's what we always have to remember. It's not max, it's a
Okay.
minimum. So if it's 150, check the box, no
Okay,
problem.
okay.
No problem. And if the depth is 200, no problem. It's-
Okay.
Yeah.
That answers that question. Thank you. I'm sorry, just one last question. I'm on that
No,
page.
go ahead.
Side Street, because you brought that up in your general comments at the beginning. I think that's good. I'm trying to understand it a little bit more. Go ahead.
So in typical planning practice, you have the front setback, which is typically your larger setback.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's the way it's always been. And then in order to gain the density, you start pushing back on that setback. So the R2s get closer, the
Mm-hmm.
R3s get closer. And then you get to the village core, village area.
Zeros.
Zero.
Yeah.
So that's the intention. And so side street is very, so you have the rear is the same thing. If you want more density, you can, put it 5, 10, et cetera. So you get more space to build. Side street's a different story. So side street, you can, if you don't regulate correctly, which ours kind of is and kind of doesn't.
And again, it's corner lots
It's
as
corner
well.
lots
Yep,
only.
yep.
So the side street on a typical 100 by 100, say that the setback is 20, that side street is 15, so it allows you to encroach ever so slightly. Then it can go to 10, and potentially go to 5. But again, it's not, you don't want to have that building, especially in a residential neighborhood, so close to that one other street. And then once you start fleshing out objective design standards, then you can say, hey, you could do a side-loaded garage that'll be able to go a different angle and have that apron at 20 feet off the side. And so you can start dictating setbacks that way. It's not here, but it begins to set that up.
Gotcha.
So the side street's typically smaller than the front, not larger. And the way our side setbacks are right now, they're rather confusing because it's based on the zone. Sometimes it's based on percentages. Sometimes it's based on
Right.
actual numbers. Sometimes it's based on the performance standard of what's next door. Sometimes it's based on the performance standard of the center line of the roadway. I mean, it's a lot.
And to pick a side street and a front street, if you're on a corner, you just come in with a plan and go, well, here it is. I want this to be my front and this to be my side.
You could, in theory, do that.
Yeah.
However, the code is very clear. The front is the smallest, side, this width, and the rear is the opposite of that, and the sides and length. So the
Okay.
ordinance does define that, and it has defined it for quite some time.
Okay.
But previous staff didn't see that portion of the definitions, so. That's why
Thank you.
Funkalicious lots.
Okay, thank you.
couple of typo type things that I won't go into.
Could I ask, I'm so sorry,
Sure.
one more
No,
question on
go ahead.
65. I don't want to have to come, because I had 3 on this page. On page 65, up at the top, we have the ER right across the bands, all the different ones. The R3 has a footnote 2. I go down to 2, and it talks about gross acreage. Is there a reason that all of them don't have a 2? In other words, I mean, 2, I know it's called endnotes. Should any of them have 2s, or should they all have 2s? But we only have R3 having a 2 on the definition of gross acreage, which is a great definition. Is R3 the only one that has this gross
We
acreage?
shouldn't have a footnote.
No, so we just take that off, and it applies to all those zones, correct?
Correct.
Okay, that's perfect. That's what I thought.
Yeah, that footnote should be for everything.
Okay, thank you.
Because again, the idea is being able to get our density numbers.
Correct.
That's why we're going gross.
Yep, absolutely.
Do you have anything else on?
Not on that page, no.
I'm up to page 98, so if you have something before that.
Well, I do on 78 and 79. This is all of our permitted uses, which I absolutely love, the layouts that you guys came up with. I mean, it's really easy to look at. So if we're looking at 78 and 79, and my first question is on residential, coming down 3 after residential, middle of the page, short-term rental, that is permitted in the village commercial.
Yes.
So that's short-term rental.
Vacation rental.
Vacation rentals. Okay, that clears that up. And then obviously you can do the long-term if we do the mixed use. Okay, then if we go to the live-work unit, a CUP, what is a live-work unit?
So a live-work unit is a new housing type that doesn't exist in our community.
Correct.
It provides another housing option. It's been done in a little bit larger cities. But the idea is that you build a storefront on the first floor, and its building code definition is like a B for an office or some other type of commercial storefront. Great example that was used in San Luis Obispo is the insurance agent has their office sitting on the front. Then the upstairs is a whole different building code reg, which is an R3 as an apartment. So literally, they own that one building that is their office in the first floor, their living area in the second floor.
But is it a CUP or is it permitted? Isn't it just a,
Conditional use permit.
but isn't it just a mixed use of an apartment and a
No,
retail
because
downstairs?
It's integrated. That's the fundamental difference. They're
Gotcha.
integrated.
Stairs inside and
Stairs
stuff.
inside, very much so.
Perfect.
So it's a little bit, from a conditional use standpoint, we want to be able to condition what type of uses are on that first floor or what have you, but they're integrated as one structure. A mixed use structure.
Totally separate
Totally
entrances, the
separated.
whole thing.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
absolutely.
That, okay, clears it up. Thank you. And how about further down the daycare, small or large, we're allowing that in the village. Seems like that should be a CUP. I would hate to see unless we have to under state law, a large daycare family go on Copenhagen Street on the ground floor.
You have to allow by right where you allow residential by right. This
So we do a mixed use,
Yes.
then you have to.
Correct. So that's staying in line with state law. So a great example is an existing single family
Yeah.
that's right now that are because we have quite a few of these in the village. If they wanted to turn it into daycare by right, we have to let them do it. So We can make that the caveat too, is existing residential. We could footnote it.
I would footnote it because Rasmussen's could become a daycare unit. I mean, and then if it's permitted in the VMU, shouldn't it be also permitted in the, we allow mixed use in the professional office, we allow mixed use in the CR zone also.
Yeah, we'll have to just do a general footnote, so we'll.
Wherever there's residential, you allow.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Then on 79, this is where, yeah, okay, this is where our, Jack, you and I were chatting a little bit. If you start on land use, you get down to wine and distillery tasting. And we're permitting these things in the VMU. It seems like I wouldn't be opposed to allowing microbrewery tap room, wine distillery, bar taverns, outdoor sales, alcohol beverage, permitted. Anything that's permitted in the VMU seems like it should be also permitted in the general retail, commercial retail, because we do allow mixed use there. And if I open a microbrewery, I can go to you, I can open it in the town, but if I want to do it down by Nielsen's Market, I've got to get a CUP. Seems odd. Seems like a CUP here and not down there, you know, but to me, I'd rather see it just permitted unless there's a reason that we want to have them all in our village core.
So my reason and rationale is this, is the CUP gives you a little bit greater control considering that there are more residences there that are existing and allows, and again, if it's permitted and unless it's new construction, it'll go right in. There'll
Yep.
be no, you get a zoning clearance, we don't post it online,
Okay.
it goes. And so while I see your reason and rationale, I look at it as, from a practitioner standpoint, if I'm going to open up a microbrewery or distillery tasting or whatever there, I want to make sure that I'm not harming my local residents. Now, that's my opinion. That's the way I've been sort of as a practitioner would typically do. If the commission feels strongly to just allow it as permitted, we most certainly can.
My point was just to either allow it permitted in both or CUP them in both. I'm not arguing one or the other than why one other than the other.
And that is why one over the other is the amount of existing residences
Closer to the,
closer to these uses and to allow for some opinions by the community or, you know, to allow for that public discourse to occur for something that might affect their neighborhood shopping centers. Because as much as we call it general commercial, and again, if I were
yeah,
as a part of the general plan, I would have not even called it general commercial because these, you know, New Frontiers, Nielsen's, those they are general, but they're more our neighborhood commercial spots. I mean, they're, even when I go for lunch over at, you know, Valley Fresh, I'll run into someone and I'll say hi. That's very neighborly, and they function
Makes
as our
sense.
neighborhood spots.
I'm fine with it. I'll leave it like it is. I just wanted to see the rationale. I didn't see in here land use, and maybe it's barbecues. I know after I went through and I said, where's barbecues here? And then I know we have a conditional use permit for barbecues, I think, in our VMU. But
Yeah, that got left out.
so it should be in there under,
It should be under restaurant.
and be CUPs.
Right. So we will make that, because it's defined in the definitions,
Yep,
and we talk about it
We
in
talk
the
about it.
restaurant business uses.
it's just not in the format, yeah.
I need to stop doing these things at 2 o'clock in the morning.
And that would be a CUP in both the VMU and the CR? I mean, they're doing barbecues down there right now, you know, both markets, so.
Yeah, and that's a good question, is do you want it to be, and that's a good question of whether it's primary versus accessory. So let's pick on the New Frontiers.
Right,
It's accessory.
It
Not
is.
doing it every.
correct. It's not a barbecue restaurant.
No.
Correct.
So if we can further define it in the footnotes and or definitions, accessory to, not the primary cooking.
But it's still, in my opinion, because it's the same reasons that we don't want the smoke going down the street, blowing into houses that are close by or whatever, it should still be a CUP because, boy, guys, you can't do it 365.
Right.
And we got complaints from the condo development next to New Frontiers.
Another alternative is to do a TUP. That way, again.
Temporary,
Because with the conditional use permit, we don't want to historically, what our code is anytime that they didn't allow city staff to make a decision, we took it to y'all.
Right, CUP.
And so where if it's an ancillary, from a professional standpoint, if I find it ancillary, if you operate it on
Saturdays
X
and
date,
Sundays,
X
yeah.
date,
Well, yeah.
X time and X time, we'll give you.
And that's
freeze
the
for entire
temporary
year. Right.
difference in the
And then,
CUP.
and
Got
then
it.
that then sets the parameters, and we can even say, hey, on a day that's designated a high wind warning day, nope, can't, can't go out. And then utilizing, our new code compliance officer, Jennifer, who's now full-time,
Mm-hmm.
she's now looped into it, and we can go out and enforce those regs a lot easier. So if we want to go down that route, I would suggest potentially that versus the more rigorous
I would
CUP.
do it rather than permitted in that, in any district, CUP in the temporary permit. And the last one I had on this page is vehicle rental. And this only comes up because of the MOKS, because we've never had a vehicle rental. I assume MOKS fall under the vehicle rental because they're licensed by the state of California. But the vehicle rental, to me, we're doing CUP on the CR, and we're doing permitted on the VMU. I would push hard to have that be a CUP so that it isn't staffed. It's a big deal to have vehicle rentals in town. It could be an Avis. I'm not picking on Mokes. It could be anybody, and they pull in with 30 cars and they're doing it, and do we want that? I don't mind it, but under a CUP, so we can see hours of operation and make sure we put some parameters, some conditions on them. Ergo, the Mokes can't play loud music all day long, convertibles that they're renting out. That's just a condition. We're not saying you can't do it.
So it does say it needs to be on-site. You most certainly can make it into a CUP, no problem. And then we could either leave it silent and let the commission do its thing, or we can cut some additional regs in it. But yeah, I mean, it wouldn't just be that. It would also be the Avises and the Hertz of the world that would fall into that.
Right.
And like I said, the definition does say the parking needs to be on-site.
Yep.
Just an FYI. That particular business would be, if the code were to go in effect, would be considered existing non-conforming.
Correct.
So, and I'll.
Well, I don't want him to leave. I like him. I'm just
So-
pointing it out.
So yeah, so it would lock him into where he's at, and if he wanted to move again, then we'd run into the CUP situation. One thing to note, that there is a new personal services restricted definition. I don't know if you guys caught onto that. And there was one that was very well-defined type of business that is utilized here in the downtown.
It's the massage.
No,
No?
The beauty sales with
Oh, where they are
They're out
outside.
demonstration.
standing there.
Yeah. So that's under.
How do you get rid of them? I go like this. They're walking along and they're following me.
So that's and that we'll talk later about that or talk after the meeting because they shouldn't be doing that. But we purposely constructed the personal services restricted to basically say if you are selling beauty skincare products with a demonstration free of charge, no appointment, no nothing, you are a personal service restricted and you're not allowed in the village. Again, the same thing would apply if that were to happen. The ones that are there are locked in.
Yeah,
But once they go away,
right.
hence why we have time limits.
Right.
The time limits will get defined one more time and to ensure that, we expire those and they don't come back.
No, that's good. I applaud that too. I would just push for the vehicle rentals to be CUP in both zones, just because it's in the CR, which is general commercial, and
Makes sense.
I'd rather have it permitted down there and not here, but I get why we're doing that.
So if that's a consensus, we can make that change.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, and you know where, if we turn the page on to page 80, this is where the outdoor barbecue is. On number 4, I just circled that one.
knew there
Use
was
associated
barbecue
with
in here
food
somewhere.
service and use on the same site. So that was where I saw that, and it's got to be regulated. So that's nice, that it's on the same site.
All right, so we'll throw that into the actual table instead of a
Yeah.
footnote, and then per our discussion, we'll make those changes.
Right.
You're halfway through.
Yeah.
And again, it's a lot. It's
Yeah.
this is My previous jurisdiction actually went through very similar, but they just repealed the whole code, so a lot easier.
Can I ask on 82? And this is, part of it's just, it's the old stuff, under B, well, it's crossed off, but 2, under the, I get the addition of, you increase from 300 to 500, you'd mentioned that earlier, which is good, smart. B, okay, so you can, it doesn't give how much you can increase outdoor seating and patios. Should that not be a square footage also?
So right now, you can increase it all you want. And so it's referring back to the parking of 1111, which
Correct.
we then have the new stipulation of, well, proposed stipulation of eliminating the parking altogether. So we can make it clearer if you'd like.
Well, it's only because we've got it was 300, it's 500 for addition of 500 square feet on the interior, but I would just put a 500 square feet addition in the 2-year term, or 300, whatever. I mean, we're doing 500, maybe it's 500. You've got to have the space, but just so that we have it as a number of square footage in a 2-year term.
Yeah, we
Just be consistent with interior.
right. We can
seating.
most certainly do that. And again, that's so that we can do it not over the counter, but again, through a zoning clearance. So as long as it meets the development standards, we're good to go.
Right, right. And then you went all the way to 91, right, Jack, or something?
98.
98, okay.
And again, just a question. The title is Public/Institutional District, but in the purpose and intent, it talks about public facility slash,
Yeah, well-
why is facility in there and in here and not in the title?
Yeah, the facility was just a leftover what I originally was going to call the blue section, but then I changed it back to meet the general, be consistent with the general plan. So we'll make that change.
Okay, and 98, same thing, 99 at the top. Also, I think 11-8-4 should be 11-8-3. On page 99.
Yeah, there is something.
On page 98, you've got -1, -2, and then it goes to -4 on page 99.
We'll make that change. Well, again, once the final product gets more in tune, and based on Commissioner Peterson's comment, it's easier for us to look at it from a clean version, and that will catch a lot of these little gremlins with
Right.
clean version versus red line.
Okay. Are you going to go through and just do a word search where it says development plan and change it to development permit?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so there's one on page 103. There is no Chapter 19 yet, is that correct?
That is correct. I'm working on it, was working on it this morning. So.
And what is Chapter 18 going to be? Because that's not mentioned at all.
Chapter 18 is your telecommunications facilities chapter. That's not being changed at all. It actually will have one little minor change to make sure the zones names are correct.
And hopefully formatting. Okay. Page 115,
Jack, could I go back to 111?
sure.
Under A and then B, 2, additions. We just talked about the 500 square feet, right? So we're in addition, now we're into 10% or more of the existing, then additional parking would be required.
Yeah, so we want to just stick to the 500.
Correct,
Yeah.
that's my point. Yep, thank you. And then you talked about the, change of use, that's That's great, okay. And I noticed that you did the parking at, well, it's on the next pages. Let's see, it's on, it would be on 116. Did I jump beyond you? Where were you at, Jack?
Yeah, you jumped one ahead of me.
Okay, 15 you're on?
Yeah, 15, just a minor thing, and the numbering goes 5, 6, 7, 9. The 9 should be an 8.
Yeah, it looks like the 8 got moved out somewhere, so we'll fix that.
Okay, so you had something on 116?
So 116, and this has been, you know, something that's come up before. We've changed all of this to 300 square feet, one parking. We used to be 500 and 300, and then it was a mess. And now we're consistent. I don't care if it's 500, 400, or 300, but you made it consistent. So we're good with that. We do not allow parking. We do not require parking for sidewalk seating, which I assume that section is the encroachment permit. It's on public sidewalks.
That is
And-
correct.
And I think that's absolutely wrong, because you're requiring it on private patios, but not on public. In fact, you could argue it's more valuable, because it's free. Number one, the land is free, because it's the city who gives you the encroachment permit. Number two, it's right out in front on the street where a patio might be in the back. So if I expand my patio X amount of square feet, I got to provide parking. But if the city gives me these seats, I don't have to provide parking for that use, and I have the exclusive use. So that is, to me, really unfair. The other thing is, right above it, one space for 300 for outdoor seating. I think it ought to be not the same as inside. Inside seating is more valuable, it's used more. There are days where it's too hot, as today, too cold, it's rainy in the winter. We've talked before, one space per maybe double it, 600 square feet of floor space for outdoor seating, just to, because say you're using it only half the time. Make it 70%, whatever that number is. Outdoor seating is not as valuable as indoor seating from a use standpoint, and so if we could change that and then look at, just make whatever the encroachment permit on public the same as the private patios. I don't know what those numbers are, but we would all believe that indoor seating is more valuable than outdoor. You're going to use it more, ergo you need more parking.
We will certainly could put it to 1 to 600. 1 to 750 might work just as well, too.
Yeah.
That's not a problem. As far as the sidewalk seating goes, that is yet to be determined whether that section is going to remain in or not.
Gotcha.
So
But if it does, just say Aaron at least wants it to be parked.
We took it to the council, and we kind of didn't get the direction I hoped for.
Well, we do have 3 that have encroachment permits. It was allowed when
Right.
we did the sidewalks. Everyone knows that.
And it could just be where
And that's grandfathered in.
it could just be where I might need to just take the sidewalk seating out for this time being, because it won't be ready for prime time, because I still need an additional vet from the council. And we'll bring it back as a part of another series of changes, because also what wasn't ready for prime time, landscaping, I didn't touch that. I didn't touch fencing, which, I don't know if you guys knew this, but any one of you can put up a 6-foot-high fence in your front yard.
But not over
I knew
6.
that.
You got to get a permit
If it's
for over
over
6.
6, you have to get a permit.
Right.
Right, but front yard, 6-foot-high
Front-
fence.
front
Yeah,
yard.
yeah.
Front yard. That is like unheard of in our state. And a couple other ones that
We like our privacy, Rob.
hey, I'm all for privacy as well, but you know, particularly here in the VMU, it allows it here in the TRC and everything. So it's just like, whoa, that's just weird.
Yeah.
But I just couldn't get there. So I think, based on your comment, based on the fact that council kind of didn't give us enough feedback yet, I think I'm just going to unilaterally take out the sidewalk seating for the time being. Save that for another day.
For the public.
For another
Yeah,
ballot.
yeah. Then the other,
But the 600.
yeah,
we-
whatever's reasonable,
Right.
it seems.
And what I'll do is I'll take a look at some of our other neighboring codes and see what they say. I know in my last jurisdiction, they had 300 for the outdoor seating,
And-
which is why it's there. But I could take a look at some of our other more tourist-driven ones and see what they have, and keep that, what you said in mind, because you are correct. I mean, a day like,
Not as used.
it's not as used as a day that's coming up, say, in the next couple of days.
Right.
Hell, people will sit there on a 4th of July parade and
You roast.
be there all day long.
The other one on page 117, which I like community gardens put in there, that's the second kind of paragraph down under recreational. It's 2 spaces. My only question was how big? Like 2 spaces per acre? I don't know, because what if it's a 2-acre community garden and you have 20 people that are working there every day and you've only got 2 spaces? It just seems like there ought to be some rationale to the size of the community garden. You know, minimum of 1, but every acre's 2, 3, I don't know. I didn't even know where we're going to put them, but perhaps down in front of my house, that wonderful piece of property that could be a great community garden, you know, it could be. But people need to park there, not in the cul-de-sac, is my point.
I'll take a look at what other communities
Yes.
have for community gardens, and that's a very good point. The community gardens concept typically was for lots that were unimproved, so you can only get 1 or 2 of them. So, but based on a performance standard per acre, per square footage, is
Something like
appropriate.
Well, that area right in front of our house on Long Island, that used to be a community garden.
Oh, that was too?
Yeah, that was great. No houses then.
Yeah, I mean, especially in a community like ours, I think advocating for those smaller garden spaces
Yeah.
is a fantastic use, especially if someone buys it and wants to dedicate it out. Having it ready to go on our code is very valuable.
And I don't want to throw a whole bunch of parking on them. But some reasonable amount, if we get a pumpkin patch, this, you know,
Right.
5 acres or probably not, but anyway. What page are you on, Jack?
123.
Okay.
About halfway down the page, number 3. It says, this subsection applies to all districts except the following residential districts in Chapter 6. That's all it says.
Because Chapter 6 is all the residential districts.
But it says the fact it says the following implies that there's going to be something that follows.
All right, I'll take a look at that section. It's already confusing to me to begin with, so I'll take a look.
Yeah, and this is obviously from the original.
Right on that one, didn't we?
Well, and this is another section that this commission in particular over the last 3-4 years hammered out accessory structures. So I'll let my opinions go on.
Only because of one particular neighborhood that we had issues with. Or they had issues with each
Yeah,
other. We
yeah.
didn't.
You have anything else, sir?
No, I
I'm
don't.
on 126.
Okay.
Up at the top, item 2B. It says accessory dwelling units may be permitted in either converted portions of a structure. I'm not sure what that means, either converted. Could you clarify that for me?
It should read, accessory units may be permitted in converted portions of a structure that are not used as livable space, i.e. garages, laundry rooms.
So either shouldn't be in there.
Correct.
Okay. And item I2, it's shown in the master fee schedule. Should there be a reference to where that can be found?
Master fee schedule is available on our website, it just alludes to, what the development impact fees are consistent with state law. So we have a series of fees. We're just putting it out there that if you're over 750, you're going to owe fees.
So you can go to the website and do a search on master fee schedule and it'll come up?
That is correct.
Okay.
And that terminology is alluded to throughout this document because, again, we don't want to put the fee into the ordinance. We want to allude back to the master fee schedule.
Right, I was just
Right.
saying maybe a reference to where they could find it, not to put the actual schedule in.
Which is another reason why we want to codify the ADUs, because right now that's not in there, and it requires that we codify what square footages we can get to capture back residential fees. And so that's, again, trying to think forward about, when we want to require them, and that's consistent with state law.
I've got a question, 127.
Before you go there.
Oh, go ahead. Yep. You're on 26?
On item J1B, it says, "The connection shall be to the abutting public street." And I don't know where the open parens is, "and the entranceway shall consist of front porch." I'm not.
And Rafi, you'd alluded to that earlier, that we can do some things on ADUs to make them nicer to the front, and they have a porch and
And this
things.
is one of them. So
Yeah.
if an ADU entry faces a street, the primary entrance oriented towards the street and directly accessible from the adjacent sidewalk, the entryway shall consist of a front porch with a minimum depth of 5 feet, measured from the building facade to the post, and a minimum length of 8 feet. That's objective. We're not telling you the color, we're not telling you how it looks, just gotta make it support. Or portico, recess, or stoop. Again, having those measurements. So again, it's having that, tying that relationship from a pedestrian level to the buildings that are in the front in an objective standard. Those don't exist right now because we don't have a code. But it's not dictating a particular, architectural style either.
Now, on page 127, you talk about the DD1, DD2 overlays. In your introduction, you said you'd like us to discuss overlays. What would you like to hear from us on?
So the
on
design
that
district
subject?
overlays, those are already going to go to the DRC, but this is more of a, again, plan development overlays. So we would just write in the ability to, for someone to request a plan development overlay. A great example of a plan development overlay that isn't a plan development overlay is Mission Oaks, actually, because if they're all clustered and they all preserve a lot of open space, that's technically a plan development overlay, just done way back when, before plan development overlays existed. So we don't have much tracts of land that are available in that aspect. But again, that's not to say that the future, we amend an urban growth boundary to allow more, whether it's to the north or to the east, et cetera. And then those tracts then become potential future development areas. And a plan development overlay is then allowed. And it's like a zoning code amendment anyway, so it needs to go to the council. But again, it sets up the stage for what are those exchanges for additional density. Do you set aside open space? Do you set aside affordable housing? Is it a combo of both? What is it that we will do to then relax standards to get a better product, but you give us something back in exchange? We don't have to codify it now, but it's just something that we could, again, potentially write in now and save for the future.
I had a question, 127, or just a clarification, under K4 on page 127, accessory dwelling units in multi-unit dwellings shall be excluded from the open space requirements. Is that because you have to have X amount of square footage of open space per roofed area, and therefore they're excluded? So you don't have to increase your open space, you have an ADU, is what you're
That
saying?
is correct, yeah.
Okay.
It's
That's
to
by state law or
facilitate ADU
something?
development,
Yep,
so.
okay, thank you.
By the way, this section 11-12, I happen to be on page 147. I like the formatting that's there. Again, I think it's something you did and didn't copy from somebody else. With the indents and.
Yeah, we're definitely, Word is not a page layout program. I know that much. So, but no, comment noted about formatting, and we'll try our best to get that completed.
Oh. And then the signs. Again,
Could we, before we jump to signs, just page 159. And at the bottom, this is the live entertainment nightclub. And this is new. And so I'm just trying to understand it. So we allow live entertainment nightclubs. We allow them
Through a CUP.
through a CUP. Yeah, right there on page 60, 160, top, conditional use permit, limitation use. We've got the decibel levels established by, I suppose the CUP covers it. My fear was, we talked about this at one time, and I don't know when, you have almost a theater district with an outdoor theater. And what is appropriate maybe on Copenhagen, on Mission Drive over in Chomp, live music is not appropriate next to the theater. And a CUP, I suppose, handles that, but so that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that we handled it that way and it wasn't
Yeah, the
permitted.
limitations on the TUPs for the live music that's accessory. So say someone wants to play a nice little string guitar outside.
outside of a winery that night. Yep,
Yeah.
you can do that over the counter with you folks, but the
That's-
CUP is the,
Yeah, the
Yep.
CUP is the full-blown, I'm going to have a nightclub with.
here's
my-
your conditions.
Here are your conditions, here's your security plans, here's everything under the sun, parking, because it's truly just an intended space. A great example of a nightclub live entertainment is, what's the one? Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, believe it or
Yep.
not, that would
Yep.
fall under that definition.
Yep.
So.
Okay. And Jack, not to jump your,
Go ahead.
on signs, but I assume DRC's looking at this, and I didn't even look at it. I figured that that's a bigger fish to fry.
Signs are very much a bigger fish to fry, and they are not been touched, nor, that's a whole separate work effort. I was going to allude to that in my planning manager's report, which will be very brief. So.
okay. Yeah, and my only comment there was that this is an example of just horrible formatting. I mean, it's so,
That's
There you
taking
go.
our sign ordinance very kindly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
Hey,
horrible.
you stole these forms. These things that you did so nicely, they're over there. It's the only thing that's good. I had some other questions back at the beginning, that under definitions, because we jumped a few pages in there.
What page?
Could I-
on definitions,
Yeah,
like page
Number-
14 or something?
yeah, oh, I'm okay up until page 27. Oh, I'm sorry, my bad, 26.
Way back.
Yeah, because we did a few definitions, then we went into the meat of the things. One that is,
For what it's worth, I don't have anything else.
so 20,
Thank you, though.
26, the one that has come up before many times is our building height. And we've had some issues with building height. I'd like to see a better definition. We talk about it's 35 feet, we know this, 50 feet, we know this, but it's the ground level elevation. I'll give you the example of the retirement villa that went off of Maple Street, and it went up the driveway and in, and it's 35 feet, and you measured how many feet from that final grade do you measure? Well, they argued, and they won, I lost on that argument, that no, it just comes straight down 35 feet, but then it comes out 4 feet, and it goes on a slope another 8 feet. If you're down on the sidewalk, it's 43 feet in the air. And I'd like to see somehow, if we can, where that the ramp runs out 5 feet from there, or 6 feet, but not just where you drop a plumb bob to the bottom of the foundation, and you go 35 feet, and then you got a retaining wall that's 6 feet beyond that.
So my suggestion is,
I know it's hillside development, too. It
my suggestion is to
dovetails.
change, if you want to go there,
Yep,
and this is a commission here, we change the building height to be measured by average natural grade. So what that means is that a survey would need to be taken of the site, and they would need to find us the average natural grade, which is basically taking points of the site, highest, lowest, average, and it's taken from that. So that way, on a hillside, if it's going down, the 35 can incorporate either be lower than the grade itself, and that's included, but can't reach a certain height, so it's particularly well utilized for hillside developments.
So you
That's
couldn't
what
put it
I'd
on
like to
top of the
see.
hill, but you could put it partway down.
Exactly.
Correct. And that, to me, it was a slip up on that last development, gosh, 10 years ago. And we were like, what? And we've never corrected it. So
So
it's
if you
good that
want
we're
it
looking at
corrected
it.
to average natural grade, luckily for you, I have a definition ready. But I would like consensus of the commission to make that change. And that is and
It's kind of a standard thing in other cities.
very
And
much
it's
so, hence why
something that
hence why I
comes
brought it up very quickly.
Frequently.
And if that's a change, that's fine. It won't affect stuff like here in the village, just because
more flat.
It's already flat, but it will affect things that are in the hillside. And I will add the caveat: that will not go into effect for any building that has a current application. So Site C is it. If you make the change, then they're still stuck with the old definition.
Yeah.
But if you're, and I didn't want to go there, and so if you're okay with that, I can make that change to average natural grade, which would then precipitate a
Yeah.
new height section with actual
It'll help.
graphics.
I think it would help.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. It's something that has come up over and over again.
It has.
So with that also, again, I alluded to fences. That will then open up your fences to then you can redefine them the way you measure your fence heights on a lower and upper grade as well. So that kind of helps out in that situation where, if you have a retaining wall, they measure.
And then go 6.
They measure, yeah, and then go 6, whereas the average natural grade allows that to go lower. So it ends up helping that out ultimately in the end. And again, writing that definition, we'll be able to then work on do the fence definition at least for now, and then come back with a different work effort for amending fences.
And if you'd put a note somewhere just to bring it up to the DRC when they're talking about signs, because it has come up before, like a ground sign as an example, not to pick on them, but Sanger's Winery. They're 6'6" or whatever they are, but 2 feet away is a 3-foot retaining wall. Their sign is 10 feet in the air. And that is, it should be in the DRC also when it pertains to ground signs and pole signs. Just, they can throw it out, it's their DRC, but just, I won't remember because I won't be at the DRC.
As I recall, we had a long discussion about that sign, and what they actually put up was not what was in the conditional use
Oh,
permit.
that could be, that could be.
And nobody ever did anything about it.
Next definition question on page 27 is catering services. A business that prepares food, it's right at the top, food for consumption on the premises, so they're preparing it for consumption on the premises of a client or at their place of business, meaning that you're preparing it and taking it to an office and catering it. But how about a barn or event center, or, I mean, that means,
Or even a private home.
or, yeah.
We can most certainly broaden.
I would just because, not that I cater, but somebody could cater and they want to take it to a barn and they're having a wedding, but you can't cater out of your restaurant because, anyway.
Right.
Child care facilities that provide, okay, so we go down to child care. Child daycare facilities that provide non-medical care and supervision, But then under 1, it talks about what a daycare center is, commercial and it says 15 children, non-residential, infants, centers, preschool, sick children, centers, child nurseries. It's saying that, I don't know, I'm just wondering about, we're saying sick children, we're saying non-medical care. We're saying daycare facilities are non-medical care. I get that, it's not a hospital, but then if you're sick, it just seems odd.
Yeah, the sick children is just for parents who need to drop their sick child off, but we can strike that out.
It just, yeah, I mean, and then the other question on this whole daycare question is, we're setting up for the small ones, the 15 as the large, and we've got the 14, then we've got the younger one. These numbers, to me, are confusing. We're talking about, say, under large family daycare, you can have up to 7 to 14 children. However, children under the age of 10 years old who reside, so I have a daycare and I've got kids that are under 10, they're off at 3 o'clock, they come home from school, now they count as a child and I have to send people home. It just seems that's maybe age 6 or some, maybe non-school age. I don't know how to word that. I know where you're going. You don't want 4 kids that live there and you get another 7 and you don't have enough supervision. It just seems like, I just know friends that have a daycare and I know their kids come home at 3 and most of those daycare kids go home at 3.
Part of it is state standard, so we just.
Is it?
Yes.
Okay.
That's why you got the 15 and up, 7
Yeah,
to 14.
those are the brackets.
Those are the brackets, so.
So, and,
Well,
okay.
I'll take a look at the state standard to make sure that the language is actually correct and concurrent with it, so.
And look at number 3 also. It's very, if that's state standards, 8 or fewer children provide no more than 2 of the children are under the age of 2, and at least 2 of the children are over the age of 6. What? That's a calculus conversion. You know, he had a birthday yesterday, you're in violation.
Welcome to
If
child
that's
care
state,
licensing.
then I get it. Then I get it. I just want to
Well,
bring those
I'll
up.
review the child care licensing standards and.
My mother did daycare, and it is very regulated.
Yeah, it is.
You need to have so many adults per the number
know.
of children
Even if they're
and
your own kid.
all that stuff, and your own kids count. So,
Probably left you in the car during work hours, so
Yeah.
it counted.
Luckily for
You
you,
went to
I
the cave.
will ping my wife, who actually works in that industry.
There you go.
She'll set me straight very quick.
Page 28, under top, commercial recreation facilities outdoor. It is talking about establishments provide this may also include related commercial facilities, including bars, restaurants, video games, arcades. I don't, we need to be clear, we're not saying that it's video game arcades outdoor. We're saying that you can outdoor things that are also related, may also be related to indoor commercial facilities, including bars, all right? So just indoor, you know what I mean? Right after, may also include related indoor. I'm sure that's what we all wanted.
Yeah, we're trying to greenlight our axle things.
The other, under community gardens, which is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down. Most of it's stricken, but then you put community gardens, a site used for growing plants for food, urban, blah, 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 maintained by community residents. I don't know if you can define community residents, but I don't know if people from Grover Beach should come down to our community gardens and use them. Although you'd be in the exception, but I don't, it just says to be used by community. Could a community out of Lompoc come over and say, we want to put a community garden in, and we go, okay, you're part of our community? Or do we just open arm it and we don't care? I'm just asking
Say
that question.
Solvang residents.
Residents of Solvang and
Yeah.
Sweden as well,
That's,
you know. We
yep.
can tighten it up.
Direct. There was something here on,
If you, I don't know where
No.
you are, but on page 29, I just
29, I'm sorry.
am curious on the definition of department. Department is the Solvang Planning and Building Department. There's no other departments that, I don't,
In this code, it's trying to be specific of who the department is, but there are other departments that are called out, such as Public Works and Utilities, and those are called
Yeah.
out specifically.
okay, I was just wondering why that definition is here.
definitions
It's
to
not
provide,
hurting anything, it's just.
definitions to provide clarity, and because it is talking about the planning department, generally, it's just defining that, but if it is in reference to another department, it will call that department out specifically.
Gotcha.
And it is the planning department, not planning and building.
Well,
It used to be planning and building.
it's planning and building. Building is a division. I don't know the specifics related to the use of the term, but it is reference to both.
Anyway, it seemed strange to me, so I thought I'd bring it up.
I've got another one on page 29, under drive-through business. I mean, we don't want the drive-through windows, obviously, and we don't allow that in the city. I'm 99% sure we don't allow drive-through food operations and things. Drive-through businesses, any businesses, either by design or operation, provide services, products directly to occupants of motor vehicles. And somewhere we're probably going to say we don't allow this, because that's why we're given a definition. However, as an example, I know that a coffee shop in town sees the local come up and walks it out to the curb. Do we allow curbside delivery like during COVID? It was all curbside delivery, if you remember. Domino's, even Rite Aid, everywhere they didn't have windows, you just had curbside and you couldn't park in them. I don't know if we exclude that. I don't know how people feel about that. I am really against drive-up windows and that kind of thing that we have on fast food, but I don't know if we say we're going to ban directly to occupants of a motor vehicle. An older person comes up and we take the food to go to them in the parking lot. Is someone going to complain? Probably not, but anyway.
Would a car wash fall under this?
No. Car wash separately defined as automated.
Yeah,
car
separate
wash.
under.
Or, mechanical car wash. So that's an interesting question. My suggestion is to be very specific here. And so I actually, thinking about this now, I would add also not only walk-up window, but or if it includes a menu board that you order from. And then you park your car and get your stuff. I mean,
No,
if it
that's a
walks
good
like
point.
a duck, quacks like a duck.
It's
a duck.
Yeah, right.
And so in this one, I would almost tighten it up to be extremely specific. Now, do we want to dedicate curbside pickup? How much do you want to get into it? It really comes down.
I know.
And so if you're doing that, if a restaurant does that as a favor to someone who, hey.
Handicapped, doesn't want to do it
give you a
older.
call.
Yep. 3 kids in the car to get their laundry,
Yeah, have at it. That's your business practices. But, once we start defining that, I think it's.
We
it
could be
creates-
regulating a problem that doesn't exist.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, essentially, that's what it is.
So do we call it then, drive-through is drive-through, getting your directly from a window where the business doesn't have to walk outside to get to you?
I think it's.
I don't know how
being
you do that.
Serviced and or ordering from, ordering from a drive-up.
Kiosk or window,
Or whatever. Because
or
essentially.
their handhelds or any of that stuff that we don't want,
Just,
right?
we can tighten it up.
Okay.
And
And then it would define out that you could do the laundry to the lady with the
right.
3 kids.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, you can also then, does not include ancillary walk-up service. We'll
Perfect.
figure it out.
Thank you, thank you. COVID-3.
Yeah.
Page 32, and I'm just, I keep harping on this one because it's a new one for me, is on page 32, bottom, the first number 1, alcoholic beverage retail establishments. We're defining them as businesses that dedicate more than 25% of the retail floor area to alcoholic beverages are considered general retail alcoholic beverages. I'm not understanding that, I guess.
Liquor store.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just trying to define a liquor store without calling it a liquor store.
Okay.
So.
They're general retail.
Correct.
But the following are also considered, I would just have considered, but I see if they go to, but if they're more than, they have to be more than 25%, then they are considered. Is it saying you're not a bar? Is that what this?
Well, no, I mean, it's more of again, I guess nowadays a liquor store isn't a liquor store. But, it is the old school liquor store where that's where basically you go to buy your hard alcohol. They got a ton
Yes.
of beer, wine, hard alcohol, and dedicate a certain amount of just really quick package convenience.
But that is considered retail and we allow it
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to
to,
avoid. And
okay.
yeah.
Okay, okay. And we're back to where we started, for me, sorry about all that. So I don't have any more right now.
Well, hurry up.
So, are we done?
I'm done with my comments, yes.
Do you have any questions for us? Is
No.
there some more direction, somewhere you'd like us to discuss?
I think we're good. I'm assuming the consensus of changing some of the permit procedures are good.
Yeah.
And then again, I mentioned to Randy and to Lisa and everyone else, this is not just a one and done. This is very much, we'll continue looking at our code and ways to modernize it. And once we do this large update, then it becomes the yearly, hey, does this work? Does this not work? What needs to get changed, et cetera. So, but thank you for joining me in this journey.
So is that your plan to review things yearly, or,
Once we get,
that's certainly
Once we get
maybe
it
the other
formatted.
extreme from every 30 years.
once we get it codified, the idea is come next September, come next October, we
November?
would take a look at the code and begin the codification process of state laws, et cetera. So typically state laws are done in September. It gives APA California and our legal team a chance to tell us what we need to codify, and we come back and we make changes per state law, and then little things that are caught up. So
There's
great.
always grants pass.
Yeah, yeah. So, anyways, that's the intention.
true.
Is you do it every year, and then as things pop up, or say we determine that the building height doesn't work and it's really screwing with our development processes, then we go ahead and amend it. And that's the key is being able to be on a consistent schedule and say we're willing to take a look at this. Our siding ordinance is a larger push, and so I'll get into that in my planning manager comments.
Okay, so, any other planning commissioner comments?
No, just thanks for all the
John's
work.
ready to go.
It was a lot of
I'm ready to
stuff.
go, yeah. Thanks for the entertainment.
Planning commissioner manager report?
Yeah, so very quickly, so next Monday, the general plan to which you recommended approval will be going to the council for their review and approval. So it is a big day for our department, so looking forward to that. On Thursday, we had our first quarterly business talk. We had quite a few participants. We went over events, and we went over code compliance and signs. So currently, we do have a sign survey that's up, available. If you go to tiny URL, it's TINY URL.com/Solvang signs, all one word, and you'll get access to the survey. It's a quick 10-minute survey, just asking you about our sign ordinance, asking about what we can do better, what can we change, and just get a couple questions to really gauge. We're hoping to get a lot more business participation in our sign ordinance. And that's actually, after this is done, that is the next work effort, will be the sign ordinance. And that's another chapter that's long overdue and it needs an overhaul. Our DRC will be having actually 2 meetings this month, both on July 18th and then likely July 25th, which is the next Thursday after that. So, because we do have a rather large agenda, so we can't just get it into one meeting. So we're looking to do 2 dates instead. As for when your next meeting is, it could potentially be August, but depending on what we hear back from the DRC, and then also talking to Randy, I may bring this to the council just so they can review as well. So don't know about a August planning commission date, but for sure in September, if this can get all piled down, and you'll get another clean copy. And thank you for the, Commissioner Peterson, for the notes to basically have a clean copy to look at, and then maybe we just might give the old copy so you can compare, contrast the two together
That'd be
instead.
good.
And Randy, you have any other comments? No? And again, thank you for your patience. I really appreciate it. Thank you,
Yeah.
Commissioner Adler. I know it was a lot of stuff,
Yeah.
but it's a lot of work that needed to get done. So
Go light your fireworks, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, I could quickly add, I think this is a huge step in our effort to implement that red carpet, not red tape and that I've been advocating and have commented before that Raphael didn't use quite the same words when we interviewed him, but you know, he impressed me with that attitude. So that's the main reason, one of the main reasons he was hired. So we're working that direction. Sign ordinance, like you said, is next, and that's obviously other duties as assigned, but we're getting there. So this is a huge step.
It's just so nice to have professional people
Yeah.
and
Very much.
know that you know what you're doing. We struggled.
We have
You-
we have an
You
excellent
notice
council.
we've made hardly any comments on the new stuff. You know, the stuff that Jack's like, look at that, because it's formatted perfect. It was really melding the old with the new that we have the questions with, yeah. So I was,
We have an excellent council that gives us the latitude to do the things that, and understands, and commission in this case, gives us the latitude to implement the professional recommendations. And we both hope to be here for a long time. So,
Well, that's
you know,
good.
that's the goal, and we can keep this ball rolling.
Thank you.
Sorry. With that, meeting's